I still remember the way his voice dropped an octave, as if he was embarrassed for me. "Flights are $1,500, Mom," he said. "If you can't afford it, just stay behind." He didn't say it kindly. He didn't say it with love. He said it like I was a burden. A weight too heavy to take across the ocean with his picture-perfect family. And in that moment, I didn't argue. I just nodded. And quietly booked my own ticket. The older I get, the more I realize that love doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's in the small, consistent things. Like remembering someone's favorite pastry. Calling to ask how their back's doing. Or making sure a chair is set for them at the dinner table. I used to believe my son, Marcus, understood that. I believed it the day I co-signed the loan for his first home. The day I sold my late husband's antique watch, the one I'd kept wrapped in silk, to pay off a surprise hospital bill for his daughter. And the day I moved out of my own house so he and his wife could get on their feet. I told myself I was doing it out of love. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? But over time, that love started to feel one-sided. It began with small things. Missed calls. Unreturned texts. An invitation that arrived late. Too late for me to plan a ride. I brushed them off. Told myself they were just busy. Told myself that families change, that children grow, and maybe, just maybe, I needed to stop expecting the kind of closeness we once had. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the moment they planned an international trip for the whole family, without me. I first heard about it from my neighbor, Linda, who'd seen the Bon Voyage Facebook post Marcus's wife had shared. "Oh, how lovely you're going to Portugal. That's always been on your list, hasn't it?" Linda had chirped, handing me a bag of lemons from her tree. I blinked. Portugal. And that's when my heart began to sink. Because I hadn't been told anything. Not even a mention. That night, I waited for Marcus to call. And when he didn't, I called him. "Mom," he sighed halfway through chewing. "We were going to tell you. It's just, we've been planning it for months. It's kind of a family thing." "Aren't I family?" There was a long pause. Then came the sentence that cracked something inside me. "Flights are $1,500, Mom. If you can't afford it, just stay behind." He said it like I was asking for charity. Like I hadn't already given away years of my life, my savings, my peace. To make sure he never had to feel left behind. I hung up shortly after. Sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees. And cried. Not loud. Not messy. Just quiet tears that felt like they'd been waiting for this permission to fall. You see, I never needed the trip. What I needed, what I deserved, was a simple acknowledgement that I mattered. That even in this new chapter of their lives, there was still a page for me. The next day, I walked into my room and opened a small wooden box I kept in the back of my closet. Inside were old bank receipts, pension statements, and a neatly folded letter from my late husband. He'd always been practical, bless him. Always told me, "Martha, don't just give. Guard." I didn't listen then. But his voice echoed in my head now. I sifted through my finances. Turns out I could afford it. In fact, I could afford 2 tickets, a luxury suite, and still have money left to bring back gifts. Because all these years I had been careful. Even when I gave. I had quietly tucked things away, held back a little for emergencies. And if this wasn't an emotional emergency, I don't know what was. So I booked a flight. Not the same airline as theirs. Not even the same city at first. But I booked it. Not to prove a point. Not to chase them down. But to remind myself that I wasn't invisible. That I was still capable of adventure, of joy, of belonging. I didn't tell anyone. I packed my bag with steady hands and chose outfits that made me feel like me again. Linen slacks, my floral scarves, and my favorite walking shoes. I even bought a small journal, planning to document my days like I used to before I became someone else's background character. 2 days before the flight, Marcus called. "Hey," he said, his tone a mix of obligation and hesitation. "So, we didn't realize you hadn't gotten the invite. Amy thought you'd be okay sitting this one out, but we can try to get you on a flight if you want." I could hear Amy in the background, her voice tight and whispering. Something about, "It'll be awkward if she shows up last minute." I smiled into the phone. "Thank you, sweetheart. But I've already made arrangements." There was a long pause. "You did." "I did. I'll be staying on my own. Don't worry. I won't cramp your plans." The silence grew heavier. "Mom, you didn't need to do that." "No," I said softly. "But I wanted to. Because I finally understood something. Love isn't about waiting to be invited. It's about showing up for yourself when no one else will." And that was exactly what I planned to do. At the airport, as I wheeled my modest suitcase behind me, I passed a large family gathering near the gate. A grandmother holding hands with 2 toddlers. A son gently adjusting his mother's shawl. Laughter. Care. Warmth. And for a moment, I felt a pang. But then I caught my reflection in the glass. Back straight. Head high. Eyes alive. "You are not a leftover," I told myself. "You are the meal." On the plane, I sat beside a young woman in her 20s. She asked where I was going, and when I said, "Portugal," her eyes lit up. "Business or pleasure?" I chuckled. "Self-respect." She smiled like she understood. And maybe she did. The moment I stepped off the plane, a soft breeze kissed my face. Not cold, not warm, just alive. The kind of air that whispers, "You made it." It carried the faintest scent of sea salt and blooming citrus trees, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's mother or grandmother or afterthought. I felt like Martha, the woman I used to be before I gave up pieces of myself for people who took without looking back. I stood still for a while at the edge of the terminal, letting the moment settle into my bones. The other travelers rushed past me. Couples with backpacks, families holding hands, business people scrolling on phones. And I just stood there. A 72-year-old woman with silver curls, an old leather suitcase, and a heart full of rediscovered courage. I didn't come here to follow them. I came here to find me. The hotel I booked was nothing extravagant, but it was beautiful. A small boutique place tucked between cobblestone streets, with window boxes overflowing with red geraniums and ivy climbing the walls like a fairy tale. "Welcome, Senora," the young man at the reception smiled, offering to take my bag. "Is this your first time in Lisbon?" I hesitated, then smiled. "It's my first time traveling alone." He grinned wider. "Then we must make it special." And they did. A room with a tiny balcony overlooking a sunlit plaza. Freshly pressed sheets. A bowl of figs and a handwritten welcome card. It wasn't about luxury. It was about dignity. I spent that day walking the streets of the Alfama district, my scarf tucked under my chin, letting the soft accordion music from a street performer guide my steps. I tasted pastel de nata warm from a bakery window, the crust so buttery it crumbled in my fingers. I sipped coffee slowly at a cafe and watched strangers pass with the curiosity of a child. For the first time in years. No one interrupted me. No one asked for anything. No one expected me to be anything other than a woman living her life. The next day, I visited the sea. I took a little tram to the coast and sat on a bench facing the Atlantic, the wind tangling my hair and making my eyes water, or maybe that was something else entirely. I thought about Marcus. And Amy. I thought about how many things I had excused. How many holidays I had spent alone, so they could have space. How many birthdays I had received nothing but an e-card, even as I sent hand-wrapped gifts to their doorstep. How many times I told myself, it's okay, they're busy, they'll come around. But they never did. Not until I stopped giving. And that's when I saw it for what it was. Not forgetfulness. Not poor communication. But a pattern. A choice. I hadn't planned to see them. Truly, I hadn't. But fate, it seems, has a dramatic streak. 3 days into my stay, I was exploring the Mercado de Ribera, a huge food market filled with the smell of grilling sardines, fresh herbs, and bread still warm from the oven. I had just sat down with a plate of grilled octopus and a glass of vinho verde when I heard a familiar voice echo across the crowded hall. Laughter. Loud and artificial. Amy. And then Marcus. With the kids in tow, dressed in matching linen outfits like they'd stepped out of a catalog. They didn't see me. They were too busy posing for photos, Amy fussing over the children's hair, Marcus checking the lighting on his phone. I should have looked away. I should have left quietly. But I didn't. I watched. Watched as Amy ordered 2 desserts but none for her mother-in-law, an elderly woman I recognized from their last family function. She looked tired. Ignored. Like someone who had once been the center and now didn't even orbit. It hit me then. They replaced me. And not because this woman was better or closer. But because she was silent. Because she didn't ask for space at the table. And because she didn't expect love. That used to be me. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I opened the little notebook I'd brought. I hadn't written in it since I arrived. But now the words spilled out of me. You are not furniture to be arranged and forgotten, Martha. You are not a wallet. Not a babysitter. Not a placeholder. You are a woman. You have walked through grief and fire and silence. You raised a man who forgot the sound of your laughter, but you have not forgotten yourself. Not anymore. I didn't sleep much that night. But it wasn't because I was sad. It was because I had made a decision. When I returned home, I would no longer be a spectator in my own life. Back in the U.S., 2 weeks later, with sun on my skin and strength in my steps, I walked straight into my lawyer's office. Harold had been my husband's friend. A kind man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a softer heart. I need to make changes, I said, folding my hands calmly. He looked up from his desk. To your will. To everything. I told him about the house I co-signed, the one still in Marcus's name. I told him about the trust fund for the grandkids I'd been funding quietly. I told him about the savings account I had opened for emergencies, and how I now saw that the emergency was me. He nodded slowly, tapping his pen. You're ready to protect yourself. I exhaled. I am. We spent the next few weeks unraveling decades of generosity. Not to punish them, but to reclaim me. The house title was revised. I retained a silent lien. The trust fund paused, pending new conditions. I even updated my will, naming a local scholarship foundation as a partial beneficiary instead of blindly leaving it all to Marcus. It wasn't revenge. It was remembrance. A way of telling myself, you matter. I didn't tell Marcus immediately. But life has a way of presenting its own stage. About a month later he called. His voice was stiff, the way it always was when he needed something. Hey Mom. We just found out the kids' school is doing this international trip next year. Amy thought maybe we could use some of the trust for the flights. I smiled gently. Actually, that trust has been paused. What? Why? Because I realized I need to revisit a few things, I said simply. It's time I stop giving more than I receive. Silence. Then the sharp edge of disbelief. You're serious? I am. He was quiet for a while. Then came the expected line, I just thought, family takes care of each other. And that was the moment I stood fully in myself. Yes, I said, my voice calm and unshakable. Family does take care of each other. I just realized I'm part of that each other, too. That night, I sat on my porch again. Same blanket. Same tea. But not the same woman. I was still alone. But I was no longer lonely. Because for the first time in a long time, I was sitting with someone I had forgotten to love. Myself. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Marcus again. And this time, it wasn't a phone call. It was a cream-colored envelope, thick and pretentious, with gold-embossed lettering. My name, Mrs. Martha Evelyn Harper, scrawled in Amy's sharp cursive on the front, like it was written by someone performing etiquette rather than offering sincerity. I turned it over in my hands, the way one might turn over a snake, carefully, cautiously, half expecting a bite. It was an invitation to a family celebration. Their wedding vow renewal. 12 years of marriage, and now they wanted to parade it in front of friends and family with white tents, champagne fountains, and floral archways. The venue was printed at the bottom in fancy serif font. Hawthorne Hills Country Estate. I remembered that name because I helped pay the deposit when they first got married. Of course, they'd forgotten that part. I sat with the invitation on my kitchen table for 3 days. Every time I passed it, it whispered at me, "You're just an afterthought. You're only wanted when you fit the picture. You'll be seated near the back, if seated at all." By the 4th day, I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile, the kind with dried orange peel and cinnamon bark, and took the envelope out to the garden. I sat under the oak tree my husband planted when Marcus was born. The roots had cracked the soil over the years, just like my heart had cracked trying to keep this family whole. I opened the envelope again. Read the words. And I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I laughed. Not bitterly. Not cruelly. But with a kind of freedom that made my ribs feel lighter. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I made another plan. Not out of spite. But because I had finally learned, I don't need a reserved seat to feel worthy. The day of their vow renewal, I woke up early. I wore my best sundress, pale blue with tiny white flowers, the one my granddaughter once called Grandma's pretty sky dress. I put on lipstick. I made myself a full breakfast. And then, I drove 2 hours north to a place I'd always wanted to visit. Windmere Botanical Gardens. Just me. No schedule. No expectations. Only joy. The gardens were in full bloom, sunflowers bowing slightly under the weight of their golden heads, lavender dancing in the breeze, and hummingbirds darting through patches of fuchsia like whispers of color. The sky was open, wide, and unapologetically blue. I walked slowly, savoring the way sunlight filtered through the leaves and kissed the top of my hair. No one rushed me. No one needed juice boxes or attention or last-minute solutions. I sat on a bench by a koi pond and watched the water ripple as a soft wind passed through the trees. A young woman nearby had her child on her lap, a curly-headed boy maybe 2 or 3 years old. She was feeding him strawberries, smiling, patient. He looked over at me and giggled. I smiled back. The mother followed his gaze, then nodded at me kindly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" I nodded. "Perfect, actually." Because it was. That night, I got a photo from a cousin who had gone to the vow renewal. She sent it with a message. "Were you okay? We didn't see you there." The photo showed Marcus and Amy beneath a white archway, surrounded by people dressed in pastels, their smiles bright and brittle. The kind of smiles people wear when they're trying too hard. Behind them was a seating chart. My name wasn't on it. It was then I realized something that took my breath away. They hadn't forgotten to seat me. They hadn't expected me to come at all. And somehow that made me smile. Because for once, they were right. Later that week, I received another envelope. This one wasn't an invitation. It was a legal notice. Marcus had attempted to refinance the house, the one I co-signed. But the lien I'd quietly filed with Harold had stopped the process cold. He hadn't called me in a panic. Not yet. But I knew it was coming. Sure enough, the following Friday evening, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. "MOM," it said, all capital letters, like an alarm bell. I took a deep breath and answered calmly. "Hello, Marcus." There was no "Hi, Mom," no warm-up. Just a demand. "Why is there a lien on the house?" I stayed quiet for a beat. Because I own part of it, I said gently. And I no longer feel safe letting that go. He scoffed. We live in it, Mom. I know. That's why I've never asked you to leave. But I won't allow you to leverage it without my consent anymore. You don't trust me? He said it like he was the one betrayed. Like it was an insult that I'd drawn a boundary. I answered honestly. I trusted you for 30 years, Marcus. But trust isn't blind. It's earned. And lately, it's been broken. He was silent. Then he launched into all the predictable things. That Amy was upset, that I was being difficult, that I should have told him sooner. But I wasn't moved. I was no longer the woman who sat by the phone waiting for a call that never came. I was no longer the woman who funded everything from birthdays to broken dreams just to be allowed a seat at the table. I wasn't begging anymore. I was standing. After the call ended, abruptly might I add, I sat in my quiet kitchen and stared out the window. The hydrangeas I planted last spring were finally blooming. Blue, purple, and wild with color. They had taken their time to blossom. Needed care. Sunday boundaries between watering and rest. Just like me. I poured myself a glass of chilled lemonade and raised it toward the flowers like a silent toast. To growth. To peace. To the woman I was always meant to become. You know what betrayal looks like? Not always knives in the back. Not loud arguments. Not even raised voices. Sometimes, betrayal comes wrapped in polite smiles. Inside pastel-colored envelopes that say, "Thank you," in looping gold script. I discovered this on a rainy Wednesday, sitting cross-legged on the floor of my guest bedroom, surrounded by old boxes of photos, letters, and receipts I hadn't looked at in years. It started innocently. I was organizing. Trying to declutter my house the way I'd been decluttering my spirit. Letting go of what no longer served me. Making room for what might. That's when I found them. A stack of thank you cards from Amy. Spanning over a decade. Each one thanked me for something different. A gift. A loan. An extra check for a little help this month. And I noticed something strange. Each card had a date. Each one corresponded to a time I had never given anything. Not officially. Not knowingly. I sat there, holding a card from 3 years ago thanking me for helping us upgrade the kitchen appliances. It was signed in Amy's perfect cursive. The problem? I had no memory of giving them money for appliances. But I did remember something else. Marcus asking to borrow my card to order a replacement fridge because his own was maxed out. He told me he'd reimburse me by the end of the week. He never did. I dug deeper. Pulled out old bank statements, receipts, email printouts from my online orders. I had kept everything. Not because I was suspicious, but because I was the kind of woman who never liked losing track. And what I found shocked me. Charges I didn't recognize. Online purchases shipped to their address. Clothes I never wore, electronics I never used. Payments to furniture stores. Baby items long after the kids had outgrown them. At first, I thought I had simply forgotten. Age does that, doesn't it? But no. These weren't my mistakes. They were theirs. Marcus had access to my Amazon account. I'd given it freely years ago so he could help me with technical things. And Amy? She had my card number stored from the time I paid for their emergency vet bill. They had quietly helped themselves. Bit by bit. Purchase by purchase. Until my generosity had become their entitlement. That night, I sat in my recliner in the dark, lit only by the soft glow of the lamp beside me. The pages of my notebook rested on my lap, open to the list I'd begun keeping. March 2017. $850. Child's dental procedure. August 2018. $2,300. New AC unit. November 2019. $412. Urgent car repairs. 2020 to 2022. Over $15,000 in undocumented transfers, purchases, and withdrawals. My hand trembled slightly. Not from rage. From clarity. Because I realized I hadn't just been left out. I had been used. And the worst part? They hadn't even tried to hide it. Because they never thought I'd look. They thought I would keep giving. Keep nodding. Keep swallowing my questions. But they forgot something important. I am not a fool. I am a mother. And mothers may forgive. But they never forget. The next morning, I called Harold again. I need more than a lien, I said, calmly but firmly. I need to secure what's mine. All of it. He asked me to come in. When I arrived, I brought everything. My notebook, my statements, my records. I laid it out on the table like a jigsaw puzzle of betrayal. He read in silence, occasionally lifting his eyebrows, nodding slowly. After nearly an hour, he leaned back and sighed. Martha, he said, do you want to press charges? My breath caught. No, I whispered. I just want it to stop. He nodded. And that's when he introduced me to someone new. A financial investigator named Renee. A sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a direct voice and a no-nonsense expression. I work with women like you all the time, she said. And let me be very clear. This is not just misuse. This is theft. I swallowed hard. Don't worry, she added, her tone softening. You're not alone. And you're not helpless. Over the next few weeks, Renee and Harold worked together quietly. They traced accounts, flagged unusual purchases, helped me close and reopen bank access under my name alone. They even helped me secure my online accounts, changed my passwords, canceled old cards, set up alerts. And with their help, I made one final decision. I would confront them, not with screaming, not with threats, but with truth. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Marcus showed up at my door unannounced one Saturday morning. He looked agitated. His eyes were tired. His hair unkempt. Not his usual, polished self. Hey, he said, hands shoved in his pockets. Can we talk? I nodded. Invited him in. We sat at the kitchen table where I'd once taught him to tie his shoes and where he'd once scribbled crayon hearts for Mother's Day. How are you, Mom? He asked, awkwardly. I'm good, I said. Very good. There was a long pause. Then he looked at me with a mixture of irritation and discomfort. I'm just going to say it. Amy's upset. You've changed your accounts. You closed the trust. You put a lien on the house. What's going on? I looked at him for a long moment. Then I slid a folder across the table. Inside were the printed statements. The charges. The notes. I didn't speak. I let the evidence speak for itself. Marcus flipped through it quickly. Then slower. Then he stopped. His face flushed. His jaw tightened. Mom, I held up my hand. No excuses. Just truth. He swallowed hard. We thought it was okay. You always said you didn't mind helping. I nodded. Helping. Not being robbed. He flinched. That's not fair. What's not fair is you treating me like a bottomless wallet instead of your mother. His shoulders slumped. I didn't know it added up like this, he muttered. But Amy did, I said. My voice didn't rise. And so did you. There was no argument. Only silence. I'm not pressing charges, I added. But from this point on, I won't be giving blindly. If you need help, you'll ask. Formally. In writing. With receipts. If not, the answer is no. He nodded slowly, shame thick in his expression. I just thought we were family, he whispered. We are, I said. But I am also a person. And I will not be treated like less than that ever again. When he left, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply sat back in my chair, and breathed. Not because the wound had healed, but because I had finally cleaned it. And for the first time in years, it could start to close. 2 days after Marcus left my kitchen with the folder in his hands and his pride in pieces, I received a text from Amy. Not a phone call. Not a visit. Just a text. It read, "We should talk. I think you've misunderstood a lot of things." No apology. No acknowledgement of the credit card theft, the Amazon purchases, the casual looting of my life. Just that. I had misunderstood. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I put the phone down. I had nothing to say. Not yet. Not in that tone. Not through that screen. Instead, I walked out into the garden with my pruning shears and went straight for the roses. It had become a ritual since returning from Portugal. Every morning, I'd check the garden, not just for weeds, but for signs of life, signs of care. I trimmed what was dying, fed what was hungry, touched what needed softness. That morning, as I cut away dry petals, I whispered aloud without meaning to, "I won't be spoken to like I'm a child." The wind rustled the trees like it agreed. The next few weeks were eerily quiet. No visits. No calls. No invitations. At first, the silence felt punishing, as if they were icing me out for daring to stand up for myself. But slowly I started to realize. It was peace. Peace from the constant worry about being needed but never appreciated. Peace from wondering if I was being manipulated. Peace from bending myself into shapes that no longer fit my soul. With Harold and Renee's help, I began going through every part of my finances, every title, every document. I closed 3 old joint accounts I'd forgotten about. Took my name off Marcus's backup credit line. Updated my will again, this time with clearer boundaries and stronger protections. Then, I did something I hadn't done in decades. I booked a small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Just for me. A week away. Alone. No expectations. No obligations. Just the sound of birds, wind in the trees, and my own company. On the second morning in the cabin, I woke to the sound of rain tapping the windows. The forest outside was shrouded in mist, like an old story waiting to be told. I sat on the wooden porch wrapped in a knitted shawl, tea warming my hands, and let the silence speak to me. And in that stillness, memories rose. I saw myself, 28 years old, holding Marcus for the first time, crying with joy and fear and love I couldn't name. I saw the way I used to dance barefoot in the kitchen with my late husband, humming Sinatra while we cooked spaghetti at midnight. I saw the woman I used to be, before she was turned into someone's emergency fund, someone's backup plan. And I whispered, "I miss you." But then I smiled. Because she wasn't lost. She was returning. When I got back from the mountains, my house felt different. Lighter. Safer. I spent a day rearranging the living room. Hung a new painting in the hallway. Brought fresh yellow tulips to the kitchen table. I even moved the chair I used to sit in during all those long, lonely weekends, and replaced it with a bookshelf. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. That evening, just as I sat down with a glass of wine and a good book, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Amy. Standing there in expensive sunglasses and high heels, her hair perfectly blown out even in the wind. She didn't look humbled. She looked annoyed. "I didn't think you'd answer," she said. "I didn't think you'd come," I replied. She stepped inside without being asked. She looked around the house as if inspecting a museum. Familiar, but no longer hers. "I think we should talk," she said. "I'm sure this whole thing has been very emotional for you." I raised an eyebrow. "For me?" Amy sighed, the way one sighs when asked to explain something too obvious. "Marcus is very upset. He feels like you ambushed him. And the lien on the house, it's created issues with our refinancing." "So I heard. And the trust account?" she asked, arms crossed. "You set that up for the children." I did, I nodded. And I can set it down too. Her eyes flashed. You're punishing us. No, I said softly. I'm protecting myself. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off, calmly, clearly, as if I were slicing through fog. I know about the purchases, Amy. I know about the accounts. I know that Marcus accessed funds without permission. And I know you used my card to buy handbags and plane tickets and groceries you never reimbursed. So if you came here to convince me I'm confused, I assure you, I'm not. She blinked. You checked our spending? I checked my records. She went silent. You taught me something important, I said. That silence isn't always kindness. That boundaries are not betrayal. That love must have limits, or it turns into self-destruction. Amy's expression began to crumble. For the first time, she looked small. I never meant to. You did. But that's in the past now. And I've forgiven you. But forgiveness doesn't mean restoration. It means release. I opened the door again. She hesitated. I don't want a fight, she whispered. There's no fight, I said kindly. There's just space. The space I needed to reclaim for myself. She stepped out slowly, looking back once before walking to her car. And I shut the door. This time with peace. That night, I journaled under a warm lamp in the same notebook I had carried to Portugal. They may never understand what they lost. But I now understand what I gained. And that's enough. The next morning, I awoke to find something on my doorstep. A package. Inside was a picture frame. Silver, engraved with vines. No photo inside. Just a note. For your new memories. Amy. I placed it on the shelf. Empty. Because not every apology needs to be accepted. But I kept the frame. Because now, the memories I fill it with will be mine. The invitation came in the mail. Again. Another one of Amy's glitter-dusted envelopes with embossed text and matching font. This time, it was for a family dinner. A formal one. Celebrating her father's retirement. It was scheduled for a Saturday evening, in a restaurant so fancy it required valet parking and a dress code. Inside the card was a handwritten note. This time, not in gold ink but in simple blue pen. It would mean a lot if you joined us. The children miss you. And so do we. Amy. I stared at that sentence for a while. Not because I believed it, but because I could see it for what it was. Strategic. Maybe the recent confrontation had left a mark. Maybe the trust fund no longer being theirs to use had changed the atmosphere in their home. Maybe Amy was trying to repair something. Or maybe they just wanted to be seen doing the right thing. Whatever the case, I didn't RSVP. Instead, I circled that same Saturday on my calendar with a different note. Dinner with Claire and Miriam, 6:30 p.m. Claire and Miriam were two friends I had met recently through a local community group for senior women. Independent women who'd walked roads just like mine. Some were widows. Others had divorced. A few had grown children who'd done exactly what mine had. We met on Thursday afternoons for tea and stories. Sometimes we laughed until our sides hurt. Other times, we sat quietly, nodding, listening, offering a hand when someone needed to hold it. They became my family in a way my blood relatives hadn't been in years. Not out of obligation, but out of mutual respect. That Saturday, I dressed in a soft emerald blouse with pearl buttons, the one my husband once said made my eyes look alive. I wore comfortable heels and spritzed my neck with lavender perfume. And as I stepped into the warm restaurant where Claire and Miriam waited by the window, candles flickering, bread already on the table, I felt something sacred. Wanted. Not tolerated. Not managed. But welcomed. Midway through dinner, as we sipped our wine and shared chocolate mousse, Claire leaned toward me and said, "You're glowing tonight, Martha." I smiled, not out of modesty, but from truth. "I think it's the peace," I replied. And it was. Back home later that night, I checked my phone out of habit. One new message. It was from Marcus. Mom, you weren't at the dinner tonight. The kids asked about you. I know things have been complicated, but they love you. I do too. I'm sorry for everything. No explanation. No excuses. Just those final words. I'm sorry. For a second, my heart softened. But then I remembered all the times I'd waited by the phone, all the birthdays spent alone, all the ways they'd twisted my love into a transaction. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked into my bedroom, opened the top drawer, and pulled out the photo frame Amy had left on my doorstep weeks earlier. Still empty. Still silver. I walked to my closet, pulled out an old shoebox, and sat on the edge of my bed. Inside were photos from a trip to Portugal. Printed, real, not just pixels on a screen. Me standing by the sea, arms open. Me smiling in front of the yellow tram. Me sipping espresso, journaling, breathing, living. I chose one, slipped it inside the frame, and placed it beside my bed. The next morning, I finally replied to Marcus. I'm glad you're thinking about the past. I hope you do more than just apologize. I hope you change. No anger. Just honesty. I added, I've found joy in places you weren't willing to offer. And I'm okay now. Really okay. But don't confuse my silence for weakness. Or my forgiveness for permission. From that day forward, the visits became rare. Not because I pushed them away, but because I stopped chasing them. And when they did come by, awkward, short, polite, I welcomed them with kindness, not desperation. I no longer needed them to choose me. Because I had finally chosen myself. Months later, I stood in my garden, gloves on, dirt under my nails, planting new daffodils for the coming spring. Linda, my neighbor, walked by and waved. Your yard's looking lovely again, Martha. I laughed. Feels lovely too. Because everything I touched now was mine again. My money, my time, my decisions, my peace. And peace doesn't need permission. That night, I opened my notebook once more. Wrote slowly. I gave them everything. Love, money, time. And when they saw me as empty, I found I was finally full. Of truth, of boundaries, of worth. I am not angry anymore. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am free. And this time, I closed the book with a smile. The holidays came quicker than I expected that year. First the wind shifted. Then the leaves. Then the mailbox started filling with catalogs selling cinnamon-scented candles and matching pajama sets for the perfect family Christmas. In previous years, I'd stare at those pages too long, imagining myself in one of those photos. Smiling. Included. But this year, I flipped them straight into the recycling bin. Because this year, I had a new tradition. Self-preservation. A week before Christmas, I received another invitation. This time from Marcus. It was more personal. No fancy card. Just a simple message and a photo of the kids holding a sign that read, "We miss Grandma." The note said, "Christmas Eve dinner at our place. We'd love to see you." No expectations. Just family. I stared at the image for a long time. The kids looked older. Older than I remembered. Older than they should be without me noticing. And for a moment, just a moment, my heart tugged hard. Had I become the very thing I feared? The ghost in the family photo? The absent matriarch? But then I remembered. I hadn't vanished. I had been erased. I sat with the invitation for 3 days. And I prayed. Not the kind of prayer where you beg, but the kind where you listen. And this time, I heard a voice in my chest say, "You don't need to be where you're not respected. Even if they smile. Even if they say all the right things. Respect is in action, not invitation." So I made a choice. On Christmas Eve, I woke early. I made my favorite breakfast, buttery biscuits and blackberry jam. I turned on the radio to old carols and let the sound fill every corner of my little home. I lit candles. I set my table. I took out the china I hadn't used in years. And then I opened my front door. One by one they came in, not Marcus or Amy, but Claire, Miriam, Linda from next door, even Harold and Renee, all of them carrying a dish or a bottle or a hug. My house was filled with found family. People who saw me, who honored my story, who never once asked me to shrink so they could shine. Later, as we laughed over spiced cider and told the kind of stories that make your cheeks hurt from smiling, Miriam raised her glass and said, "To Martha, for showing us that age doesn't make you invisible. It makes you unapologetic." And everyone clinked glasses. Even me. Especially me. At the very same moment, across town, Marcus sat at a table with 2 empty chairs. One for me. One for the dignity they had misplaced. I knew this because he texted me a photo again. No words this time. Just the table. The candles. The empty place. And I smiled. Because sometimes, the loudest "I told you so" is silence. A few days later, Marcus showed up. No appointment. No envelope. Just him. I met him at the porch. Sat beside him on the swing where we used to share popsicles when he was little. He looked tired. "Why didn't you come?" he asked softly. "Because I stopped waiting for people to treat me like I mattered. I waited years. And when I finally acted, you called me difficult." He looked down. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." "I know," I said. "But good intentions don't erase deep wounds." He turned toward me. "I miss you. I miss who we were," I whispered. "But I don't miss feeling small." Then, after a long pause, I looked at him. Really looked. "You can come back into my life, Marcus. But not as someone who expects me to be quiet. You can come back as a man who honors me. Not just because I'm your mother. But because I'm a human being who deserves to be chosen. Not used." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to do that." "Start by listening," I said. And for once he did. Weeks passed. Nothing changed overnight. But slowly. I saw effort. Not from Amy, she stayed distant, polite, restrained. But Marcus began showing up. With no strings. No requests. No "can you help us out?" Or "can you watch the kids?" Just coffee on a Tuesday. Just a phone call to say hello. Just a photo of the sunrise because he knew I loved them. Then came the most unexpected moment of all. Spring. My birthday. I hadn't planned anything. I was content with tea and birdsong. But that morning, Marcus showed up with something in his hands. It wasn't flowers. It wasn't a gift bag. It was a chair. An old wooden rocking chair. The one I'd given him when he and Amy moved into their first home. The one that belonged to my mother before me. The one they said didn't match the decor, and was too bulky for the new nursery. It had been sitting in their garage for years. But now, it was sanded, restained, polished to a shine. "I thought it belonged here," he said, his voice low. "With you." I looked at the chair. My mother's chair. My own memories etched in its arms like fingerprints of time. And for the first time in years, I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But recognition. Now, that chair sits by my front window. I rock in it every morning with my coffee. I watch the world wake up. And I smile. Not because I won, but because I finally stopped losing myself. The morning sun poured through the window like warm honey, gilding the edges of the curtains and casting gold over the hardwood floor. I sat in my mother's rocking chair, hands curled around a ceramic mug, listening to the birds announce spring's return. The world outside was moving again. Slow but certain. And so was I. Not running. Not hiding. But moving, with intention. That morning, I opened a letter I'd been holding on to for weeks. A response from the Scholarship Foundation I'd contacted after my last visit with Harold. They'd accepted my offer. A portion of my estate, the one I once planned to leave entirely to Marcus and his children, would now fund education for young women over 60 returning to school, reinventing themselves, or learning something simply because they wanted to. I didn't cry when I read the letter. I smiled. Because finally, my legacy wasn't about what I gave away silently. It was about what I gave intentionally. The changes I made weren't dramatic to others. But to me, they were everything. I canceled the birthday checks I used to send without fail. Instead, I mailed handwritten letters to my grandchildren. Personal, reflective, filled with stories and love. I didn't send money. I sent myself. I removed Marcus and Amy as primary executors of my estate. I appointed a trusted friend and my attorney. Not out of spite, but to protect the things I'd built, with my hands, my mind, and my heart. One Sunday, I visited a local community center that offered art classes for seniors. I hadn't painted since high school, but something inside me stirred when I saw the row of easels lined up against a wall, each one waiting to be claimed. I signed up. That first class, I painted a simple scene. A woman standing at the edge of the ocean, waves at her ankles, a suitcase in one hand, a scarf dancing in the wind. I didn't name her. But I knew who she was. She was me. A few months later, Claire, Miriam, and I hosted a garden party. Not for a birthday. Not for a holiday. But just because. We wore sundresses and wide-brimmed hats and laughed like girls. We served lemonade and little tarts and played records on a portable turntable. At one point, as the sun dipped low and the light turned peach-colored across the lawn, Miriam raised her glass and said, "To Martha, for teaching us that it's never too late to rewrite your ending." I didn't deflect it this time. Didn't brush it off with humility. I accepted it. Because it was true. Eventually, Marcus began to visit more regularly. He never brought Amy. I never asked why. Our conversations were still careful. But they were honest now. He helped me fix the fence. He sat with me on the porch swing. He listened. One day he brought his youngest, little Clara, who clung to my waist and whispered, "I missed you, Grandma." I knelt down, cupped her face and said, "I missed me too, baby." And I meant it. The last time Marcus and I sat together, he said something I never expected. "I always thought love was measured by how much you gave. But I see now, it's also measured by how much you protect." I nodded. It is. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just sat beside me in the quiet, and that was enough. Sometimes I still think about the night he told me, "Flights are $1,500. If you can't afford it, stay behind." And how those words cracked something inside me. But now, I realize they also opened something. Because what he didn't know was that I could afford it. Not just the plane ticket, but the departure, the distance, the dignity. I paid for that flight in more ways than he'll ever understand. And it bought me myself back. Now, I start my mornings with a prayer of gratitude, not grief. I tend to my garden. I sip my coffee. I write in my notebook. And every so often I flip to the first page. The one I wrote when I boarded that plane to Portugal. Self-respect is the most expensive flight you'll ever take. But when you land, the view is freedom. And I smile. Because I didn't just take the trip. I never went back.